Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Going to talk about the Venus transit at the moment because since the last couple of days, she's been building up to this very important configuration with Saturn and Pluto. But she's actually in a T-square as well with Juno. So I just want to talk a little bit about what that might be presenting for us in our lives on a personal level, not collectively, but on a personal level, relative to the world of relationships, for one, because we have Juno configured here very strongly. She's right opposite Venus. You can see in the chart here, this is a chart for the 28th of February, and we can see Venus is at 23 degrees of Aries. Don't worry about the location of everything. And if you look opposite, you can see transiting Juno at 20 degrees of Libra and retrograde. And then if we go down to the bottom of the chart, we can see that, well, in fact, we have Jupiter in the mix as well. So it's quite an interesting combination, Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, all squaring Juno and Venus. So this is quite a complex little dynamic aspect pattern. I just want to share some ideas in case this does speak to you from the level of your own personal relationships in an intimate level. We can also say that this can draw in other relationships in life that have to do with business partnerships, contractual agreements we've made with people or are planning on making with people, okay? Because Juno, as much as she is the goddess and principle of marriage, she's the principle of commitment, right? And a commitment we step into, and that can be both personally and professionally. It's an agreement, a commitment in some kind of relationship, whether that's professional or personal, okay? So this may be showing up for you on a professional level and or in a personal level with regards to your own relationship at the moment, if you are in one. And of course, if you're not in a relationship, which I happen to not be in a intimate personal relationship, so this is going to speak to me from the point of view of my own Venus nature within, right? Now, a couple of things. First of all, Venus in Aries, when we understand the whole concept of dignities and debilities, which I posted something just a few days ago about that, and there's been a lot of interest, and I'm really pleased that a lot of you have shown interest, and I am planning to make a video on that subject because it is very, very important. And there's a few things I want to clarify for people, so I'll leave that alone for now. But anyway, that being said, Venus in Aries is in her detriment, now, there's a couple of levels to that, right? If we approach it purely from evolutionary astrology, we wouldn't give it that much weight, that Venus is in detriment in Aries. The evolutionary model would just simply look at Venus in Aries from the point of view of evolution and what does that mean. So from that level, it's speaking to our own personal evolution, specifically relating to our own self, our own individuality, sense of identity. Okay. Now, she's opposite Juno. So these are two feminine principles, Juno and Venus, both correlating to relationships, to the experience of connection and connectedness, right? So these are very personal areas in our life, are in, there can be an experience of challenge, right? There can be an experience of experiencing an oppositional sort of response from somebody. You're trying to do your Venus in Aries thing, for example, which is you want to feel free, you want to feel wild, you want to get in touch with your passions, you want to assert yourself and go out and sort of do your own thing, create your own path, your own journey, even if it's just in the interim, short term. It could just be a week. You want to get away from your partner, your family, your household, whatever, and you just want to completely get into that Venus in Aries and just find things that you enjoy that stimulate your passion, right? That's Venus in Aries, it's passion. Um, so the Juno component in Libra, which is directly opposite, could be the issue that's being raised that's making you feel bad about that, making you feel like you can't do your own thing because you've got to meet the commitments and the demands and responsibilities of perhaps what your relationship expects of you, or however that relationship is set up. I don't know, it's different obviously for everybody, but these are some of the little things that can be triggered at the moment, and particularly because that Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter is there as well. I mean, Jupiter inherently is not a difficult energy, okay? But lining up there with Pluto and Saturn and in Capricorn, now Jupiter is in its fall in the sign of Capricorn, so it's not the best place for Jupiter. So um, when planets, well, let me just say, when the two benefics, in this case, the two benefics are Venus and Jupiter, both of them are in detriment and fall, okay? So both of those benefics are not going to be able to express in their fullest capacity of what those benefic energies can manifest and bring. There's going to be something that is lost or taken away in some kind of capacity, in some kind of way. Those planets cannot act to their fullest potential and ability when they're in their detriment and fall, especially when we're talking about just your every day-to-day in and out of life and everything that entails. Of course, when you go into deeper spaces, there can be different activation points with these energies, but just on a day-to-day basis, then they are going to. What happens is Capricorn gets the best out of Jupiter, and Aries will get the best out of Venus, but then Venus will miss out on something, and Jupiter will miss out on something. That's just a very simple way of understanding benefics, as in Jupiter and Venus when they're in detrimental fall. So we have that part of it, right? That those two planets are not in their strongest points at the moment. In addition to that, they all configure in what's called a T-square. And the apex really of this T-square is, well, it's both Jupiter and Pluto, but my inclination is to put the focus more on Pluto, because Pluto is, well, without a doubt, the most powerful planet in the chart anyway. So, okay, couple of things. First of all, just Venus squaring Saturn alone, let's just have a look at that, okay, just within itself. So the Venus component, which is that part in you that defines or identifies your own sense of self-worth and value, right? All your value systems, all the things that you enjoy, that you love, how you love and share and give, how you love yourself. That's Venus, right? So in Aries, she's greatly challenged. She's extremely fiery and passionate and impulsive and ready to take action and to take and embark on new journeys, which is a strength. It's a real positive, right? Um, but the square to Saturn is going to pull her in a bit, okay? And the square to Saturn is highly significant because it's conjunct the Pluto in Capricorn. So we kind of have Venus here being in a position where, on the one hand, there's this sense of wanting to maybe start a new path on something, right? Directing your life in a particular way relative to Venusian things, meaning relationships, social circles, friendships, and your own personal expression around art and creativity and things like that. And maybe there's this real impulse and urge to want to get going on that, but the struggle or the block or the inhibition will arise through Saturn and Pluto. Now, with Saturn, it's going to be the case of, because the Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn has pretty much meant that we've had to deal with our deepest fears and resistances and metamorphosize and transform these things within ourselves over quite some time. Technically speaking, since Pluto first entered Capricorn back in 2008. So this little expression here of Venus in Aries squaring these planets at the moment, is a 3, 4, 5 day type of experience, but it belongs to a bigger story. That's the thing to understand. So the Venus square Saturn is, Venus is, as I said, she's wanting to do the things she wants to do relative to what correlates to Aries, right? About your own autonomy and freedom and doing your own thing, right? But the Saturn is going to ask her to really look at her values from a realistic level. If we can apply the Saturn in Capricorn squaring Venus at the most optimal level, at the highest level it can be, then that Saturn can help Venus restructure some of her value systems relative to the past that she maybe hasn't let go of, that she still has attachments to. And these old values and systems are just simply not serving to the path moving forward, the evolutionary path moving forward. So Saturn is going to be like a cold, hard reminder of that to Venus, as Venus wants to do her own thing moving forward. So that can be a positive, because that can just bring into your consciousness and awareness, just, it could just be one thing, it could be several things. Obviously it's different for all of us relative to where we are in our life, but this is what it's going to bring. It's a cold hard reality of what needs to be dropped relative to past values and systems that don't belong to the direction moving forward from an evolutionary level. And Venus, she's all ready to do that. In Aries, she's so excited and she's so enthusiastic and she's so incredibly impatient, but Saturn is not going to let her take those reins and head off into the free, wild sense of feeling autonomous and so forth until she deals with some residue, right? Pluto in Capricorn is old residue from many lifetimes that we are breaking, smashing through every single day. So the Pluto coming into this adds another level similar to the Saturn, but a lot more intensified. And it's the, again, Venus is, she's all passionate and ready to go off and, run into the wild and do her own thing and all of that. And Pluto adds an intensity towards those sorts of passions. And, or if you're in a relationship, it can trigger and bring up really intense emotional soul type experiences, feelings, things that have been maybe put under the rug, so to speak. Maybe you felt some very strong feelings towards your partner about something that's happened just recently. You haven't been able to, communicate that to him or to her. Well, this Pluto is going to stir that up, because this Pluto squaring Venus is ultimately trying to help Venus transform herself relative to her own values and her journey moving forward as well. Um, and of course, it can draw in really intense emotional connections with people. You could just meet somebody on a social level, and it can just be the most incredibly intense, what feels like a life-changing moment with one person. And it can just be a one day, one night, one week thing, whatever. Or it can be the beginning of something quite profound relative to relationships for you, okay? If it's got to do with your own self because you are not in a relationship or you don't meet somebody during this time, this is all speaking to your own inner Venus, your own inner feminine, your inner values, your self-worth, your self-love. And what is it that you need to be really realistic about, Saturn? And what is it that further needs to be transformed inside you so that you can actually love yourself more, have more value for yourself, Venus. The Pluto being at the apex point, however, is a really tricky component, right? So this is what creates this T-square between Pluto, Venus, and Juno. So this T-square really is a story, a narrative in our life over the next few days, specifically to do with relationships, as I said. And Pluto is always connected to the soul. It's always connected to metamorphosis, transformation, death, rebirth, intense cataclysmic emotional events, experiences, emotional transformations. But, Pluto is never a walk in the park. So whatever this is going to bring up, especially if it's going to relate to an ongoing situation, it's going to be very testing, very challenging. But it is also going to be then important to remember that this is just for a few days. So don't let things, blow out of control, as it were, but allow it to empower you to either take the right course of action or speak up where you need to speak up, and or reassess your own inner values and what needs to be adjusted, let go of, removed, further developed, and so forth, particularly relative to your own personal identity and sense of autonomy. Right now, Pluto being the apex, just want to read a couple of comments here. So this is perhaps the most difficult of all apex planets to have operating in the chart. That goes without saying for me. Since Pluto forces the individual to undergo a complete metamorphosis psychologically before he can safely and humanely handle the compressed power of a T-square. So you see, Pluto is holding the energy that's contained in Venus and Juno here in this T-square. Pluto is the decider of how these balances, how these energies are going to balance each other out. And it is balanced because it is an opposition. That's number one. Number two, it's Venus, and Venus is about balance. And Juno is in Libra, and Juno is about balance. And of course, Libra is about balance. So we have the signature of balance being emphasized so strongly in this configuration of this T-square, just through Venus, the opposition, Juno, and Juno in Libra, and two feminine bodies, Venus and Juno. So this is all about our own personal relationships and even our relationship to ourselves as well, we could say. So the Pluto being at the apex point is holding this frequency together, and it is the one that's probing very, very deeply to either stir things up, trigger things, blow things up, depending on how this Pluto is operating for you. And what I mean by that is the lower astral expression of Pluto has to do with manipulation, control, overpowering, possessiveness, jealousness, things like that. So if this Pluto gets the better of you in this context of this particular T-square, these are some of the issues that can be triggered. So you need to watch that, because those experiences, whilst they are experiences and we feel them, deeply at times, they can be incredibly destructive. So we just need to watch how we allow this Pluto at the apex point of this T-square to dominate this T-square, and really allow it to shine through from that deeper soul evolutionary level, which is ultimately about metamorphosizing certain things in our life at the moment relative to relationships, partnerships, marriages, business partnerships. Yeah, and just one other point here I wanted to read as well. Um, so because Pluto here is so powerful and so intense, and can operate from a very unconscious, and Pluto is pretty much all unconscious, but we can, through our own growth and development and evolution, we can learn how to use Pluto in much more conscious ways. But Pluto is inherently unconscious, okay? So these points are very significant, because if we allow that, we can go through the experience of feeling torn inside. On the one hand, we can see this incredible, powerful opportunity for some very significant transformation that we can step into, right, relative to our relationships at this point in time. And it could be that we've been working on something for a few weeks, a few months, and this just happens to be a really powerful window of opportunity to amp that up, to step into a space that you couldn't do before, right? So again, it's the Pluto can evoke within us a sense of feeling torn inside of ourselves, between the willful desire to fulfill our own ambitions through force or manipulation, um, and the desire to purge the temptation to abuse our power or other people's powers in order to gain control over others, right? So you can see there are two very distinct ways that this Pluto can operate at the apex point. And the question is going to come down to how aware are you? How conscious are you? How honest are you? And how ready are you to connect to this Pluto frequency in this T-square in order for a true, authentic experience of self-empowerment without the intention or desire to hurt another person, right? So this is what we're dealing with over the next few days. We've got some really heavy-duty energy relating to Venus and our own personal relationships. As I said, the Saturn's going to bring in the cold, hard reality. This is what your relationship looks like. This is what it's really about. So all the illusions and fantasies will get blown out of the water. That's what Saturn does. It's cold, it's hard, and it's realistic down to the bone. And Saturn rules bones, of course. So this is what we're dealing with. And then Pluto, of course, as being part of this T-square. And Jupiter is part of this T-square as well. But Jupiter is nowhere near as difficult as Pluto. So Pluto is going to be the dominating force here, even though Jupiter, Jupiter is square Libra, closer, as in just 1 degree off. But Pluto, Jupiter that is square Juno just by 1 degree off. But Pluto is square Venus by just 1 degree off. And tomorrow, that Venus, she'll reach 24 degrees. So she'll be exactly square Pluto. So yesterday, today, tomorrow, and the next couple of days, in other words, this is what is stepping into our field relative to Venus. So I'll leave that with you guys. I hope that's useful information for you. It really spoke to me when I just sat there and I was just looking at the chart for today, and I thought, gee, I need to say something about this because I didn't really put enough emphasis on it when I spoke about, I think it was Venus square Jupiter in my last upload video that I presented to you guys. So this is obviously an audio because it's just a lot quicker for me to upload an audio than it is a video, and it is Saturday night and I do have plans and I'm kind of getting ready to go out. So sending you all much love and blessings, and see you soon. There's a full moon in Pisces in Virgo coming up opposite Neptune. I'm really excited about talking about that, and I'm just trying to fit in everything I can relative to the videos that I posted. I will make, and I absolutely intend to do that and to honor my word. But in amongst that, I'm actually working on people's charts on a daily basis. So I thank you so much for your patience. I thank you so much for subscribing, for connecting, for communicating in the community section and underneath all my videos. And tell me how you feel at the moment relative to this content and what this may speak to you in your own personal life relative to relationships and the urge and impulse of Venus in Aries at the moment. So much love and blessings, and see you soon. Thanks. Bye.